Welcome in everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. There's still just enough morning left here in the Central Time Zone where I could say good morning to you all and be on point there. I guess it's based on where you are. If you're in the Eastern Time Zone, you're already getting past the noon hour. Today I wanted to focus on something I thought it was interesting. One of my sources and basketball knowledge resources yesterday evening, last night, sent me over a screenshot of a conversation he was having with one of the top national college basketball analysts, one of the ones I speak to a lot. The name will remain anonymous on both my source and the college basketball national recruiting analyst. But it's a conversation we have a lot about the class of 2026, which we know right now Arkansas is in the heaviest and hardest part of that. And the hardiest part of that, and John Calipari, we say it all the time, is the greatest recruiter of all time. When you look at the high school level and bringing in players, the one and done king and all of that. But I've had this conversation a while because I track each one of these classes since I've been covering not only the Razorbacks but basketball in the state of Arkansas. But I go to a lot of these shoe circuit events, camps, different things, and I'm paying attention to each class. So one of the conversations I can constantly have with my source is just about the strength of classes, and we've both agreed for a while, that 2026 is down. But to hear it, I'm gonna use the quote that he sent me on this screenshot, so I saw it in the conversation. And again, this is one of the household name college basketball analysts that you're familiar with. We're talking about the class of 2026, and the quote goes, "This class is the worst I have ever seen." I thought about that. I really thought about. I'm like, is that maybe true? And it might be. There's been some classes out there that I would maybe you would fall into the category of stinker. And then we go back to John Calipari and we think, well, the greatest recruiter of all time. He's been around for decades doing it at the highest level. He's had his share of stinker classes to have to navigate, just like there are strong ones. Both scenarios, whether it's middle of the road, a strong class, or a weak class, they all bring different opportunities and different challenges. And I think what's interesting about this is when you look at that class, it is hard to identify outside of maybe a handful of players who you could see as one and dones, being the kind of star value where they're ready to come into college and then be, potentially a lottery pick or a first round pick, which for this class will be the 2027 NBA draft. They still have a season to go of high school basketball, then in theory, 1 year at college before they go into the draft. And so typically you can see down the road a little bit more than that. This most recent draft was a strong draft, and you had what, 8, 9 guys going fairly quickly, pretty early in that first round, many of those lottery picks. The previous draft, the one prior to that, was probably a weak draft. And I think about that, and I think about Calipari's results, getting his players into that draft and how highly they went. So all of these are some talking points we're going to get into today. And I think one of the things when I talked about Calipari yesterday, I kind of led with, as the greatest recruiter of all time, you can have a big board and you can prioritize players, and you could think, well, when the dust settles, did Calipari get everybody he wanted? I don't think any coach gets everybody they wanted. You don't win every recruiting battle. But at the end of the day, he's so good at navigating that. He's so good at roster construction. Now, when you say, well, was that always the case, really? Half his rosters were made up of these true freshmen. And you saw the postseason results his last 5 years at Kentucky. Well, I'm going off of last year and the road he's going down now. He's made some adjustments, fewer high school players. And so, then when you assess him in the current landscape, going in now to this is his third recruiting cycle at Arkansas. And then you get your team to a Sweet 16, and he thought it was a Final Four quality team last year. You start to then look at it as, okay, he's not just a great recruiter, but he's figured out how to use his strength as a recruiter to give himself a chance to not only put these players on the biggest platforms, but get them additional exposure and have program success by advancing in the NCAA tournament. So as far as we know for now, going into year 2 in his third recruiting cycle, Calipari's on the right path with not only recruiting high level guys, but getting them to deliver. So when you have a weaker class, you say, well, could that be problematic in terms of building your team and having a strong team? Not necessarily, because even if it's a weak class or one of the worst in this, the worst that this one analyst has ever seen, which is a huge statement, and it's not a young analyst either. It's one that's been around for a while. Um, it's got both challenges and opportunities, but there's a way to make it strong. If you're thinking about just the short term, which could turn into long term if your guy proves that he's not a one and done, you can do really, really well with some of the top level guys. JJ Andrews is a perfect example of that. This dude is a proven winner. We've chronicled that especially a lot through the weekend as he won MVP honors, winning a second consecutive Nike EYBL Peach Jam Championship. That's as good as you can do in spring and summer grassroots basketball, is win that title at the 17U level. But this guy's a proven winner. Now, he's including high school. He's a 4-time champion and a 2-time MVP. Oh, by the way, I think he's a top 5 player in that class. I've got him ranked 4th in my top 25. A lot of the services having just a couple of the services having just outside the top 10. My opinion is they when they do their updates, in minimum, I think he should be 10 or inside that top 10, if not where I have him. But that's where it is. And so I think Calipari's off to a great start. I said before, I'm not willing to die on the hill of looking at it right now that JJ Andrews is a surefire lottery pick as a one and done. I'm not saying there's certainly a path to get that done, but that's part of the problem with this class. Just using him as one example, is identifying right now the guys you look at and they just kind of almost can't miss barring an injury, or somehow they have a flop as a freshman and need another year, that kind of thing. You look at the freshman class that's coming in that'll be part of the 2026 draft. The 2025 class is one of the strongest classes in recent memory. It was a loaded class. We've talked so much about it. So we'll see what shakes out, how it plays out. Arkansas's got 2 of the top 10 players in that high school class when you look at Darius Akov Jr. and Malik Thomas. So we'll see for those 2 and others that make that such a strong class what the 2026 draft looks like. But this has almost a reverse effect in terms of what it looks like now, projecting ahead. Again, there's probably a handful of players maybe in 2026 class for the 2027 draft that you look at and go, okay, first round lottery. Tyron Stokes, the number 1 player in the country, for example, is one of those. I think Caleb Holt, who I have tied for second with Jordan Smith Jr., is another one. I think Jason Crow Jr., even though I have him outside my top 5 now in terms of when I look at the totality of the player right now, I think he's going to be one of those guys very likely because he can score and shoot. He's got depth of range. He's got NBA range as a shooter. He is a highly skilled scorer at every level. And at 6'3", if he can show that he can play a high volume scoring lead guard and do a competent job of facilitating, defensively, a lot to be desired right now. We'll see what he does at Missouri, where he recently committed. But I could see him being a first round draft pick. There's some other ones in there that maybe, but other ones it's not that I can't see them being first round draft picks. I can't predict it confidently right now, if I'm being honest. For me, a guy like JJ Andrews, as hard as he works, as hard as he plays, the physicality, the physical gifts he has, he's a power 3, a power wing. And so as he continues to improve his efficiency from 3, he did a really good job during the EYBL session play, all 4 sessions around 40, right at 40%, 3-point shooting on low volume. When you looked at the Peach Jam and the multiple games he played leading up to the quarterfinals, semis, and finals, when you added all that part of it up, he shrank down how many attempts he took. He went 0 for 7 in those stretch of games. I think it was 8 games. So he really kind of squeezed down on what it is that he leaned on, which was his strength, driving to the basket. And again, when you're not knocking them down, maybe that's a smart thing for a minute. Let's go ahead and get this title wrapped up. We talked about all this, how he minimized some of the stuff and stayed with the best stuff in his wheelhouse, and that was probably a good thing to do. He'll continue to improve. I'm not saying JJ can't be a one and done. What I'm saying is you look at it right now, guys like him, even Jordan Smith Jr., who I think has great physical attributes. And just like JJ, I think they immediately translate into big time winning at the college level. But in a year's time, that's a 6'2" guard, with questionable shooting range. Some of the skill stuff continues to emerge and get better. But I have question marks about that. So I see for both of those guys, let's say you get a Jordan Smith Jr., who we've talked about, my confidence level with JJ is basically a 10 out of 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. I gave it a 9.999 just to stay out of the absolute zone. And then the next highest guy, we went through my, confidence level in Calipari being able to land some of these 2026 guys. Yesterday, I revised it over the previous one I did earlier in the week because we're going to recalibrate every time we get more intel. But I have the second highest confidence level I have is for Jordan Smith Jr. right now. I put that at a 6.5. You put those guys together, I said it's going to be hard to take them off the court. You got two really good two-way players. They play the right way at both ends, and they're just winners. But we're now talking about the strength of a class in terms of how a lot of folks view these things. How does that land after their first year of college when you look at the next draft? How good are these players really? Because at the end of the day, you're projecting them out to the ultimate, right? So there's more than one way to look at it. And I think Calipari's got advantages looking at it both ways. He can deliver the message, I'm the best to ever do this, in terms of getting guys ready for the next level. And if your recruiting pitch is, look, there's other players in this class, they're good players, but it's considered, maybe a down class, which is going to be advantage you in our system. If it's going to have a shortage of players going in the first round or even in the lottery, it's not going to be from here. Here's my track record. I'll show it to you. And all he's got to do is point back 2 drafts ago where you had Reed Sheppard first, Rob Dillingham second, both going to the lottery. In any other draft class, those guys, and it was talked about at the time, when you look at that 2024 draft, those guys weren't lottery picks. So Calipari's got advantages because of his wealth of having it both ways. Again, or 3 different ways: a middling class, great classes, and not so good classes of his results once it gets to draft time. I think the challenges are picking the right 5 stars to build your next roster. You want to get the right ones. I think J.J. Andrews is a grand slam in terms of that. I said that. A Jordan Smith Jr., using him as another example, same thing. And then under Calipari, it enhances guys like that who you look at right now. I can't say, well, he'll be a lottery pick. I mean, Jordan Smith Jr., again, some of the stuff he does reminds me of Cason Wallace, who was a lottery pick. And you see what he did assisting Oklahoma City in his first 2 years in the NBA. He's effectively starter value for a guy that's not a big-time offensive player. He's developing offensively. He's a 4th or 5th option in the offense, competent shooter when the ball movement comes to him, catch and shoot, good driver to the basket when there's a lane that's opened up for him. And then on defense is where he really, butters his bread. And that's the kind of path I see for Jordan Smith Jr. But both of those guys, again, it's not to say they can't be one and dones, that they can't even be lottery picks. It's just not as foreseeable. But Calipari can tell them exactly, he can show them exactly how to get it done. So in some ways, he can sell that value of how I'm going to help you. Don't worry about, what they're saying about your class, or maybe what your specific weaknesses are, or maybe why folks aren't sure about you now. I am sure about you, and here's how we're going to do it. So I think it's both a challenge. You get the right guys to make sure you're not picking the ones that are going to bust, even as freshmen, because that's not going to help you. But then showing them the value of what your track record is when sometimes the class might be under or valued lower, and you just don't sell that as valued lower. You sell it as, hey, these folks are valuing you. They're undervaluing you. I'm not. And here's what I'm going to do for you. So I think of it like that. And again, he's got so many specific examples he can point to. It's not just selling a great pitch and an idea that you want to, run through a wall for and believe and follow. It's that he can point to a track record and say, see, here's where this exact kind of scenario played out, and here's the success we had as a staff helping our players. So to hear this is the worst class I've ever seen, That may have a lot, that may raise more question marks for more programs than it does for a guy like Calipari. Because again, he knows how to navigate all these different scenarios, whether the tide's high or low, or somewhere in between. Now, the other thing that's interesting about what's perceived as a weak class is how it will impact the players you have now on this roster, because that's also part of your recruiting. It's recruiting retention, and then balancing that with the guys that you're recruiting now. For instance, Arkansas's loaded at the wing spot. Carter Knox, Billy Richmond III, even to some degree Isaiah Seeley, who's, as Calipari says, he does things I can't teach. And the word that he's talked about in one of those recent podcasts, I think it was John Rothstein, is that Seeley is better than they thought he was. Well, he said that, about Boogie Flan last year, and we saw what Boogie Flan was putting together an all-league season before his injury. So you got a lot of competition at the wing spot. And you got J.J. Andrews coming in. Well, you've got him committed. He's going to sign. But the point is, just looking at it, if these guys are not on the level of what they can be this coming season at Arkansas, where they easily project in this next draft as first round or high first round or wherever they think they want to go, and they're looking ahead to the next draft with this 2026 group coming in, so the 2027 draft, and they're thinking, hey, this will be an easier way for me to improve my draft stock because I can work on my game a little bit. Plus, it won't be as much competition in what's expected to be a strong 2026 draft from this 2025 class coming in. So you've got to juggle that as a coach. You got to say, okay, I want to retain guys if it makes sense. I want to get them onto the NBA if it makes sense for them. But you're also, these players, some of them may wait until the spring. Jordan Smith Jr. and his family have talked about that to see who actually does leave. Who do you have coming back? I think some of these dynamics can work both ways, and you just don't know if you can get them sewn up and get them out of the way early. Great, and that's what is expected for J.J. Andrews. That's what I'm told. He'll sign early. Jordan Smith Jr. It's not that he won't sign early, but a lot of the discussion's been he's going to wait. So these things change and flip, but because of the dynamics of what's perceived as a weak class, the people in these players' camps that are advising them are telling them some of the possibilities of how things could play out. Here's a reason why you want to wait, to make a commitment would be to see what some of the top schools that you want to go to are actually doing with their rosters. Are guys going into the draft as expected? And some may say, you know what, I don't quite like where my draft stock is. I'll get another year of NIL, and I have a lot better chance to go in lottery in the next one. So we don't know. We don't know. I think, in Arkansas's example, you're thinking ahead that Darius Acuff is going to be gone after a year, possibly Malik Thomas, one or both of Carter Knox and Billy Richmond III. When you're starting to talk about just those position groups, ones, twos, and threes. Front line, you're already losing two guys. Trevor Brazile and Nick Pringle will be out of eligibility. Malik Ewan would have another year if he wanted to. I think he'd have to petition because of the clock. I don't know if he has to petition, how hard that is, but he had a year of JUCO, which is no longer supposed to count. So there may be a way. Obviously, it seems like it's just a formality, but he may have to formally request it. But Malik Ewan, if he's not draft ready or doesn't want to go and wants to stick with NIL and another year of Arkansas, could come back and give you a veteran front court retention piece, which comes back to this 2026 class and a guy like Erfan Diane, who may be one of those guys when you're 7'1", 280 and present the skills he does. Let's see if he continues to improve his stock and continues to show well and gives himself a chance to be a one and done. But you show him, hey, we've got Kenny Payne here in the program. He was gone a couple of years, but look at the track record with our big men, with him coaching them. And then you hope your big men this year show really well. But Erfan Diane strikes me as someone that's going to get a decision made and get it done in time to sign early. I guess he could change his mind on that. He's also got a visit scheduled to Arkansas, both him and Jordan Smith Jr. in the fall. But a guy that you're showing the retention part. Hey, we'll have a veteran here that you won't just be on an island by yourself. But at the same time, you'll have plenty of opportunities for playing time as a true freshman. And then you, again, showcase what you can do for him to get him, potentially in and out of the program in a year's time and into the draft. So I think, again, at this point, Calipari has already picked one of the correct 5-stars. If you say this is a weaker class and you want to point to J.J. Andrews as an example of that, I think you're off your rocker, because the guy's won at a high level, and he's already built. It's not like you look at him physically and go, well, is he physically ready? Yeah, he's physically ready to step on a college court. There's a lot of things advantage J.J. Andrews. Just the way he plays in his drive to win alone, but then you look at him physically. So I don't think there are a lot of question marks with him in terms of how it translates to the college game. I say the same about Jordan Smith Jr. All right, just over 20 minutes in, almost 21, we're going to get out of here. Just wanted to kind of talk about this in generalities, not really specifically any intel or updates to share today. Not that we don't have any, we're working on it so that we can try to confirm one or two more things and have something more for you through the weekend that gets us a little further down the road with some of these players. And so we'll do that maybe as soon as tomorrow on Friday. Want to thank everybody for being here. If you haven't done it already, please hit subscribe, like, and share. I'm Kevin McPherson. This was HogvilleNET YouTube Live on Thursday, July 24th. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Be good. See you soon.